So what have they got to do? And there's a link here to the Employment Status Manual, which you can follow up on to get a bit more information. But they've got to do 4 things. They've got to make a decision. Okay, if they're engaging you through your company, they've got to make a decision. I know they can get round it by not engaging people through companies, but let's just focus on engagements through PSCs. They've also got to take reasonable care, and that's HMRC's way of saying you can't make blanket decisions. Whether HMRC will challenge what might be perceived to be a blanket decision, we'll see. And that decision has to be communicated. So you as the individual worker have to be given that decision via what's called a status determination statement, which must not only tell you whether the engagement is inside or outside, but actually has to give reasons and solid reasons why. Then there's also, as Andy alluded to earlier, something called a client-led disagreement process that needs to be in place by each and every end client, because you as a contractor have a right to challenge that decision. And if end clients don't have all these 4 things in place, then actually HMRC can go back to the end client and say, you haven't done it properly, we are giving you the fee payer liability. So even if it's an engagement that they deemed was inside IR35, even if that's correct, but they haven't gone about it by taking reasonable care, they can actually be penalised, have the tax and national insurance deducted, and HMRC will, as it were, restitute or give restitution to the fee payer that has already deducted it. So there is a genuine penalty there for end clients that don't do things properly. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So what is this status determination statement? Well, it has to be given to you as the worker, and if there's an agency in the chain, it has to go to that agency, and if there's more than one agency, it has to be passed down the line. If it's not passed down the line, then whichever entity hasn't passed it down retains the fee payer liability. But it's got to contain reasoning, and if you look at, again, in the Employment Status Manual at 10014, that effectively says it's got to be based around the contractual terms and the working practices. So they can't just say we feel like it, they've got to say because you don't have the contractual right to do all of these things, and because the working practices involve control, involve your personal service, for these reasons it's inside, or if they don't, for these reasons it's outside. So now we move to this client-led disagreement process. There was no opportunity for you to challenge in the public sector. The only way you could do it was actually to ask for an amendment to your self-assessment return, which was effectively walking into an IR35 inquiry, and I think most people would want to avoid that at all costs. So each client has to implement a process. There's no guidance from HMRC other than you've got to respond within 45 days. And here I've got quite a lot of sympathy with end clients who've actually done things properly, because if you've given your reasons and essentially you've been challenged on those, I'm not really sure what else you can say other than what you've said already. But yeah, let's see how things pan out, because I've always expected in this early phase quite a lot of contractors to challenge it, and I think a survey that IR35 Shield did said something like 40%. They expect 40% of contractors will do so. So I do expect a lot of challenges in the future. Sorry, in the near future. Whether that happens as we move on, I'm not so sure. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So now we've sort of focused on the fee payer. The fee payer, as I said, has to make the necessary deductions. And the question one has to have is how prepared are, for example, agencies as fee payers? Because they are stuck with this liability, providing the end client has done things properly. There's been some questions around whether fee payers could challenge the status determination statement. Now, in the same way that a contractor is only likely to challenge an inside determination because that's going to result in the deduction of tax and national insurance, I can only really see agencies actually wanting to challenge an outside determination where they're not 100% sure that the end client has got it right. But the legislation states that essentially it can only be challenged by the deemed employer, and of course you're not the deemed employer if basically it's an outside determination. So that will be an interesting discussion that I think some end clients and agencies are going to have, because if an end client's been engaging Kevin for 2 years and they're desperate to keep them and perhaps keen to bend the rules to keep Kevin, that could put an agency in a quite an invidious position if they've actually not deducting tax when they believe that they should do. So it could be in some instances that through negotiation with their end client, they become the arbiter of status, because they encourage the end client potentially to change their mind. But providing the due diligence has been done properly, it is possible for agencies as fee payers, and indeed end clients if they're engaging directly and they are the fee payer, to purchase insurance. And again, Markel Tax has a policy that deals with that, but it's not a sort of get out of jail free card. It does require proper due diligence to be undertaken, because we're not going to ensure a situation where people are not approaching the whole issue properly. So there are issues out there for fee payers and agencies in particular, but there are solutions to deal with that at the minute as well. Can we go on to the next slide?
Sorry, very quickly, lots of people are asking, is there going to be a recording made available of this? Yes, there is. You will be sent that recording tomorrow morning. Unfortunately, we can't send the slides through the software that we have because we can't attach that, but you will be sent all the links that are embedded in these slides. They will be sent to you at the same time as a recording. Sorry, Paul, carry on.
No, that's great. Thanks. If you can move us on a slide, that'd be good. Okay, there's just one sword of Damocles, if you like, lurking in the background. There are provisions within the legislation for the transfer of debt. And I think where HMRC are coming from, and I don't blame them for doing this, is that already there are entities that are saying they're happy to put themselves into the contractual chain, as you see on this slide, between the agency who might be the fee payer and the personal service company. And I think what HMRC are concerned about, that some of these payment intermediaries might not be there at the moment that the tax needs to be paid over. So what they've made very clear is if there's a failure to collect and pay over the tax on any engagements that are inside IR35, they have the right to go back up the chain to recover the debt. Now, if there's more than one agency in the chain, what they'll do is they'll go up to agency one. If, for example, there is only one agency in the chain and that agency fails, then they'll go to the end client. So arguably, you could say the end client's never off the hook, even though they've actually undertaken all the due diligence and taken reasonable care that they should have done. But I guess I would also then go back to the insured solutions, because of course, if you've got an agency that's bought a sort of fee payer protect type insurance, then where that insurance is paying out, you should never have a situation where an agency goes under, therefore the debt being transferred. But people need to be aware of this transfer of debt, and it's transfer up the chain, not down the chain to the contractor.